The room shifted the second she refused to back down. Voices tried to overlap hers. The gavel hovered like a warning. And the cameras caught a moment they weren't supposed to linger on. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She sharpened it, cutting straight through the noise with facts no one wanted spoken out loud. As John Roberts moved to shut it down, you could see the tension tighten. Because this wasn't just another exchange. It was a line being crossed in real time. What followed wasn't chaos. It was clarity, the kind that makes powerful people uncomfortable. This was the moment the script flipped, the truth surfaced, and the attempt to silence her only made her words louder than ever. She doesn't rush her words, and that restraint is what makes the moment powerful. As voices attempt to interrupt, as the atmosphere grows tense, Jasmine Crockett maintains a steady pace that signals confidence rather than defiance. Her posture, her tone, and the deliberate way she frames each sentence shows that she understands exactly where she is and what is at stake. This is not an emotional outburst or a rehearsed soundbite, but a controlled insistence on facts that have been avoided for too long. Every interruption becomes evidence of what she is pointing out, and instead of reacting to the disruption, she allows it to expose the imbalance in the room. The more she is cut off, the clearer it becomes that her presence is unsettling not because she is wrong, but because she is precise. Calm, in this moment, is not passive, it is strategic. She chooses not to raise her voice because she knows that volume would be used against her. Instead, she lets clarity do the work. Her statements are grounded, specific, and framed in a way that forces listeners to confront uncomfortable realities. She does not attack personalities. She addresses actions and consequences, which removes any easy escape for those trying to dismiss her as combative. Each fact she presents lands heavier because it is delivered without theatrics, making it harder to twist or misrepresent. The room feels tighter as her words build, not because she is escalating, but because she refuses to retreat. The interruptions come predictably, almost rhythmically, as if following a script designed to derail her point. Yet she does not break stride. When cut off, she pauses just long enough to reassert her place, then continues as if the disruption never happened. This composure signals authority. It tells everyone watching that she belongs in that space and that her voice carries equal weight, regardless of who tries to diminish it. The attempt to control the conversation only highlights her resolve, turning what was meant to be a shutdown into a spotlight. Silence, when forced, often suggests weakness, but her refusal to be rattled transforms that pressure into momentum. What makes the moment resonate beyond the room is how familiar it feels to so many watching. The dynamic of being talked over, dismissed or redirected when speaking truth is one that plays out in workplaces, courtrooms, and institutions everywhere. JasmineCrockett's.com response becomes a mirror for those experiences, showing that strength does not always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like staying centered while others lose composure. Her steadiness reframes the narrative, shifting attention away from authority figures and toward the substance of what is being said. As the exchange unfolds, the contrast grows sharper. On one side, there is control through interruption and procedural power. On the other, there is control through discipline and factual clarity. The more the interruptions escalate, the more composed she appears, creating a visual and rhetorical imbalance that viewers immediately sense. It becomes less about the formal rules of the room and more about who commands moral authority in the moment. Her calm becomes a quiet challenge, suggesting that if the facts were truly weak, there would be no need to silence them. This moment also underscores preparation. Her delivery suggests she anticipated resistance and came ready for it. Each point is framed with intention, as if she knows exactly which words cannot be easily dismissed. There is no scrambling, no backtracking, only forward movement. That preparedness reinforces her credibility, making it clear that she is not reacting on impulse but speaking from a place of understanding and purpose. It turns the attempt to interrupt into a miscalculation, because it reveals who came equipped with substance and who relied on authority alone. For viewers, the calmness becomes the headline. It is what makes the clip replayable, shareable, and impactful. People expect confrontation in moments of tension, but what they witness instead is composure under pressure. That subversion is what gives the exchange its staying power. Her demeanor invites the audience to listen more closely, to lean in rather than brace for chaos. It reframes political discourse, even briefly, into something rooted in accountability rather than volume. As the moment continues, it becomes clear that the effort to silence her is failing. Not because she overpowers it, but because she outlasts it. Each interruption fades into the background, while her words remain centered. The calm assertion of facts becomes the dominant force in the exchange, shaping how the moment is remembered and shared, transforming a routine attempt to control the narrative into a defining example of composure, clarity, and unshaken resolve that continues to echo as the room struggles to regain control, and the truth she articulated keeps circulating long after the microphones try to move on. The attempt to silence her is subtle at first, wrapped in procedure and authority, presented as order rather than suppression. John Roberts leans into the mechanics of control that are familiar in these spaces: time limits, interruptions, redirection, the implied threat of moving on without her. On paper, it looks neutral, even justified, but in practice it carries weight, because everyone in the room understands who holds the power to decide whose voice continues and whose does not. What makes this moment different is how visible that power play becomes the instant it is used against someone speaking plainly and directly. The effort to shut her down does not quiet the room, it sharpens the focus. As he moves to interrupt, the dynamic shifts. Viewers who might have been passively listening suddenly sense that something important is being cut short. The instinctive reaction is not to trust the interruption, but to question it. Why now? Why here? Why this speaker? Instead of ending the conversation, the attempt to silence reframes it, turning attention away from formal authority and toward the substance of what is being said. The truth she is articulating gains urgency precisely because it appears unwelcome. Suppression, even when dressed as procedure, signals that a nerve has been struck. This is where the moment escapes the room and becomes something larger. Audiences are deeply attuned to power dynamics, especially when they unfold live. They recognize when control is being exercised, not to clarify, but to contain. The more Roberts tries to steer the exchange away, the more it feels like confirmation that the point being raised matters. Silence, in this context, does not erase the message, it amplifies it. The effort to shut her down becomes the most compelling evidence that her words are landing where they were intended. There is also a contrast in visibility. Authority often assumes it can operate quietly, that the mechanisms of control are invisible or accepted as normal. But in this moment, those mechanisms are exposed. The interruption is not seamless, it is awkward, abrupt, and unmistakable. That exposure changes how the audience interprets everything that follows. The focus shifts from who is technically in charge to who appears confident in the truth. Roberts' attempt to silence reads less like leadership and more like discomfort. And discomfort is revealing. What follows is a cascade effect. Social media clips circulate, headlines sharpen, and commentary zeroes in not just on what Jasmine Crockett said, but on the fact that someone tried to stop her from saying it. The attempt at control becomes inseparable from the message itself. People who might not have engaged with the issue otherwise are drawn in by the tension, by the sense that they are witnessing something that was not meant to be fully seen. The act of silencing creates curiosity, and curiosity drives attention straight to the truth that was meant to be contained. This moment also underscores a broader pattern that many viewers recognize instantly. Historically, silencing has rarely worked as intended, especially in public forums. It often backfires, turning the silenced voice into a symbol rather than a participant. By trying to cut her off, Roberts inadvertently elevates her position. She is no longer just making a point. She is resisting erasure in real time. That resistance resonates far beyond the specifics of the exchange, tapping into collective experiences of being talked over or dismissed when speaking inconvenient truths. The irony is unavoidable. Authority is exercised to maintain order, yet the visible attempt to suppress creates disorder in perception. The narrative slips out of the hands of those trying to control it and into the hands of the audience. Viewers begin to ask their own questions, replaying the moment, analyzing body language, tone, and timing. The truth she raised becomes the anchor of discussion, while the interruption becomes a footnote that explains why it mattered so much. As the exchange continues, the imbalance grows clearer. One side relies on procedural power, the other on transparency. The attempt to silence does not weaken her argument, it removes any remaining doubt about its significance. When authority feels threatened, it often reveals more than it intends, and in this case, it reveals exactly how disruptive honesty can be in spaces built on controlled narratives. The effort to end the conversation only ensures that it continues elsewhere, louder and more widely. Carried by those who saw the moment and understood that what they were witnessing was not just an interruption, but a confirmation that the truth had reached the point where it could no longer be comfortably ignored. The exchange peels back layers that are usually hidden behind decorum and titles, revealing how power actually moves in the room. What looks like a routine procedural moment quickly becomes a live demonstration of who is expected to speak freely, and who is expected to know their place. As Jasmine Crockett continues, the reactions around her communicate as much as the words themselves. Body language tightens, interruptions grow more pointed, and the atmosphere shifts from discussion to control. These subtle signals expose a hierarchy that is rarely acknowledged outright, but deeply understood by everyone present. Power dynamics often rely on unspoken rules. Who can interrupt without consequence? Who must ask permission to continue? Who is framed as disruptive simply for insisting on being heard? In this moment, those rules become visible. Crockett's presence challenges the expectation of compliance, not through aggression, but through persistence. Her refusal to be sidelined unsettles the balance, making the mechanisms of authority it suddenly feel fragile. The tension does not come from conflict alone, but from the disruption of an assumed order that depends on silence from certain voices. What stands out is how quickly the framing shifts. Rather than engaging directly with her points, the focus moves toward managing her participation. That shift reveals a priority not of understanding, but of containment. It signals that the issue is not the accuracy of what she is saying, but the fact that she is saying it at all. The viewers, this distinction is impossible to miss. When argument gives way to control, it suggests that the challenge posed is not easily answered within the existing structure. The room becomes a microcosm of larger institutional patterns. Power asserts itself not only through decisions, but through tone, timing, and interruption. These tools are often invisible to those who wield them, yet glaringly obvious to those on the receiving end. Crockett's experience in that moment reflects a broader reality faced by many who challenge dominant narratives from within established systems. The attempt to manage her voice exposes how those systems protect themselves when confronted with uncomfortable truths. As the exchange unfolds, authority feels increasingly performative. The insistence on order contrasts sharply with the disorder created by suppressing open discourse. The more control is exerted, the less legitimate it appears. Viewers sense this instinctively, recognizing that genuine authority does not need to silence, it persuades. When persuasion is absent, power resorts to procedure, and procedure becomes a shield rather than a tool for fairness. This exposure reshapes how the audience interprets the moment. It is no longer just about a disagreement or a point of order, but about who gets to define the boundaries of acceptable speech. Crockett's insistence on continuing reframes the space, asserting that accountability belongs there as much as authority does. Her stance challenges the idea that respect is demonstrated through quiet compliance rather than through engaged truth-telling. The imbalance also highlights courage in a different form. Standing firm in such an environment carries risks, reputational, professional, and personal. Yet she chooses to remain present, signaling that the cost of silence is higher than the cost of resistance. This choice resonates with viewers who understand the weight of speaking up in spaces not designed to accommodate dissent. Her persistence becomes a reminder that power is not only something held, but something confronted, as the moment circulates. Beyond the room, the exposed dynamics invite scrutiny. People replay the clip not just to hear what was said, but to observe how it was handled. Each interruption, each attempt to redirect, becomes part of the narrative. The focus expands from the issue at hand to the structure that attempted to suppress it. In this way, the exchange transcends its original context, serving as a case study in how power reacts when challenged by clarity and resolve. What lingers is not the authority of titles, but the vulnerability revealed when that authority is questioned. The moment demonstrates that power, when exposed, often looks less like confidence and more like fear of losing control. Crockett's role in that exposure is not accidental. It is the result of occupying space deliberately and refusing to shrink. Under pressure, the truth she brings forward forces the system to reveal itself, showing viewers exactly how fragile dominance can appear when it is met with unwavering presence and an insistence on being heard in a room that was never meant to echo with dissent. The moment does not end when the microphones move on, because its impact is shaped by how quickly it escapes the room and enters public memory. What happens next is just as revealing as what happened live. Clips are shared, paused, replayed, and dissected, not because of spectacle, but because viewers recognize a defining stand when they see one. Jasmine Crockett's refusal to yield becomes a reference point, a visual shorthand for accountability asserted in the face of pressure. The exchange stops being a single interaction and starts functioning as a symbol, representing a broader demand for transparency that many feel but rarely see articulated so clearly. Accountability, in this context, is not abstract. It is visible, in posture, timing, and persistence. Crockett Stan reframes what responsibility looks like in public institutions. Rather than deferring to authority for the sake of order, she insists that authority answer to truth. That insistence resonates because it challenges a common assumption that accountability flows in one direction only. By holding her ground, she models a version of leadership that does not rely on dominance, but on clarity and resolve. The audience responds to that model instinctively, sensing its rarity and its necessity. Transparency becomes the natural consequence of her stance. The attempt to silence her unintentionally exposes the very processes that are usually hidden behind formal language and procedure. Viewers are given a glimpse into how narratives are managed and how uncomfortable questions are often redirected rather than addressed. This exposure fuels engagement, because people are not just reacting emotionally, they are learning something about how power operates. The moment educates as much as it inspires, turning passive viewers into active observers of institutional behavior. The defining quality of the exchange is how it reassigns credibility. Trust shifts away from titles and toward conduct. Crockett's consistency, her refusal to be derailed, and her focus on substance earn her authority in the eyes of the audience. Meanwhile, the effort to suppress her undermines the credibility of those attempting it. This reversal is subtle, but powerful. It shows that legitimacy is not guaranteed by position alone, but by how that position is exercised under scrutiny. As the clip circulates, it invites people to place themselves inside the moment. Viewers imagine how they would respond under similar pressure, whether they would hold their ground or retreat. This identification deepens the impact, turning observation into reflection. Crockett's stand becomes aspirational, not because it is dramatic, but because it is disciplined. She demonstrates that accountability can be asserted without spectacle, and that transparency can be demanded without chaos. The ripple effect extends into commentary, analysis, and conversation. Journalists, commentators, and everyday viewers frame the moment as evidence of a larger struggle between control and openness. The exchange is cited as an example of how attempts to manage narratives can fail when confronted with prepared, principled resistance. Each retelling reinforces the original message, ensuring that the truth she raised continues to surface in discussions far beyond its initial setting. This kind of moment also reshapes expectations. Once viewers see accountability modeled so clearly, it becomes harder to accept evasiveness elsewhere. The standard shifts, even slightly toward demanding clearer answers and more transparent processes. Crockett's role in that shift may be understated, but it is real. By standing firm, she expands the boundaries of what audiences believe is possible within institutional spaces. What makes the moment endure is its authenticity. There is no sense of performance for the cameras, only a refusal to abandon the point being made. That authenticity is what anchors the clip in public consciousness. People return to it not for outrage, but for affirmation that truth can still disrupt controlled environments. The defining stand she takes does not resolve the issue at hand, but it reframes how such issues are viewed, reminding audiences that accountability often begins with one person choosing not to be silenced, allowing transparency to break through layers of procedure and expectation, and leaving behind a standard that continues to challenge those in power long after the room has emptied.